Я таки купил фрейтер, не стал замачиваться с квестом, который с первой защите, который вроде как не работает, потому что убиваешь всех пиратов, а сам тебе фрейтер не дает и предлагает купить. Поэтому я пока купил тупо дешевый за 5 миллионов фрейтер, который попался где-то. Вот, и разбирался, как он работает. Не так легко там было построить всякие комнатки. Просто сейчас сначала понял, где их строить. Но это ерунда. Вот, потом, естественно, построил комнату командного центра и связался с самолетами, с флотом. Вот. И флот можно стать на миссии, казалось бы, пассивный такой доход, но оказалось, что все намного сложнее, геморройней. И их можно победить, и после этого надо вручную чинить. Вообще полное безумие. Ремонт вручную. И, короче, я починил один, пошел чинить второй, и повалился, там не мог найти одного места в починке, повалился куда-то там в дыру, и, в общем, потом упал в космос, и, в общем, все стало плохо. В итоге я загрузился. Сейчас я пойду чинить еще раз. Вот этот корабль, который геморрой это починить. Вот, конечно, ремонт вручную, это вообще полный раз. Лишает смысла пассивного, как бы, пассивной миссии. Не знаю, сколько будет пользоваться. Пока это очень важно. Вот, попробую сейчас починить все-таки. Возможно, как-то можно слать нам более простые миссии, больше кораблей, чтобы они не ломались, я не знаю. Первая миссия меня ничего не сломалась, часовая была. А вторая миссия 4 часа, и все, там ломался. Вот, компоненты все понятны, вот, кроме того, вот этот компонент я не понимаю, кто Костя. 330 метров. Как это? А, вот это лестница какая-то. А у меня сюда еще спускался. Возможно, это касса. Куда мне нужно. Да, это новая коридора. Разные корабли, разные формы имеют разные конструкции. Это что ничего называется. Да, потому что вот точно не дошел просто. Я пытался снаружи как-то залезть. Я еще повалился просто. Ремонт с поставкой нужны компоненты. И, судя по всему, на каждом корабле свой эти компоненты. Вот здесь вот все его надо. Слушай, я понял. Это что, очередное?
actually at the base meeting with the main people where the interviews had been done. So this story sort of goes viral, sells a million books, and he makes Roswell famous. So I was involved at that time with him. He actually did an interview for me. I was at the time
Поставь, чтобы не записываться, как можешь исправлять.
President of Penn State University, who was chairman of the board of the Institute for Defense Analysis, which is basically the organization that started DARPA and the Jasons and all these groups. They very high, this group now that has 120 project managers, $3 billion budget. Each project manager working on some sort of research for one project or another has a budget of 100 to 150 million dollars a year. And so Walker was chairman of the board that started this whole thing. And what had happened is Bill Moore had actually sent a former CIA agent by the name of Dr. Kit Green to do an interview with Dr. Eric Walker. He said, I don't really know if you're right about what Walker is, but I got this guy, he's a presidential briefer, he knows the president, he's a very high level guy, and he said, do this interview. So Bill actually helps me. So I sort of worked to talk to Bill through the 1980s. And so he was, at that point, the first sort of major figure like this, and he had 24. And the people now are famously known as the Avery. This was his group. And what he'd done was he and a guy by the name of Jamie Chandray had given all these high-level sources that they were talking to bird names, so that when they talked back and forth on the phone, they could refer to the blue jay and the penguin and all these different people, and nobody would know who they were talking to. And so this is where this famous Avery story comes from. And so when the Tom DeLonge thing broke, I said, wow, they're doing it again. They've done this before, because I knew Bill Moore, and everybody always said Bill Moore hoaxed all this sort of stuff. I knew Bill Moore. Bill Moore was the only guy that helped me. Bill Moore may have been taken for a ride, but Bill Moore wasn't lying. Bill Moore actually had the sources, just like Tom DeLonge that Tom DeLonge had. Greer is one of them. And basically, Greer is the same story. Greer claims 540 witnesses, deep throat witnesses. And they're different than I don't deal with whistleblower people. Because whistleblower people is a single guy, he claims to work for the CIA, claims there's no way to check these things. But these guys, you can actually check who Greer's sources are, who he says, and you can confirm that Mosley was involved, and that Miller was involved, and that Edgar Mitchell was involved. And you can confirm a lot of these people who you can actually track that these guys actually did have security clearances, actually were in the government. So when Tom DeLonge gives this, I say, wow, this is the same thing as Moore. They're doing it again. It's the same thing. And because I knew I had a different impression about Bill Moore, that Bill Moore he did have the sources, just like Tom DeLonge. They were feeding him this material. And in the end, he ended up getting burned, and he actually left the field and never came back because he got accused of disinformation, of trying to work for the government. His whole thing was almost like Tom DeLonge, where somebody comes to you and says, I'm from the government, and I'm here to help you, and I'm your friend. And you go into this, and you realize the guy's an ordinary guy, and he's feeding you this stuff. And everybody does the same thing, like Bill said. What happened to Bill Moore is he said, oh, Bill was a government disinformation agent. And he wasn't a disinformation agent. He was just a guy who had high-level people, including, I believe, Richard Helms, who was former CIA director, Robert Gates, who was former CIA director, Henry Kissinger. These are some of the people that he was rumored to be dealing with. So he's dealing with these people, and they're feeding him. But it always has this plausible deniability thing, that they're putting this material out. And so what I did is, I wanted first I was going to do I wanted to do a thing on, because he's on the evil alien thing, and he believes that all the Greys are evil. And that the way we're going to deal with them, that the reason we have 20,000 nuclear missiles is because this is us putting on the boxing gloves. And we're going to take on, and he claimed that there's a test in the where we did a high altitude test in outer space test with nuclear weapon. And he claims, whoever he got the sources, that he brought down a UFO. So his impression was that we're going to use nuclear weapons, we're going to shoot them up high into the atmosphere, and we're going to bring all of these evil aliens down. And the thing that he even admits is in 1962 they knocked out all the satellites, and they created this sort of radiation belt around the Earth for 5 years. and we're going to do this. We're going to knock out all our satellites. And so I said, well, this evil alien thing's crazy. And because Tom DeLonge, I'm just a nobody down in Canada. Tom DeLonge, every time he tweets, he's got 15,000 retweets.
Итак, то, что я здесь поставил, это палка, чтобы непонятная какая-то, что он делает, я точно не понимаю. Вот здесь, собственно, корабли спускаются. Для каждого запуска нужна одна тарифания, которая мне вызывает деньги медленно, печально. Который из воздуха. Конечно, процесс очень модный. Рейд делать деньги, но не очень много. Конечно, здесь куча есть более разных способов зарабатывания. Надо искать, ругаться, а этот уже есть, простой. Требующий пожиток себе. Вот, а собственно миссия запускается отсюда. Кстати, там еще какой-то есть. Я не ходил, может тоже летает. Я просто сначала не исследовал нифига. Это, не знаю, что тут было. После, что делал. Там к вам тоже полезен. Только можно. Да, так можно вещи на дорогу, но это я могу сделать как-то. А вот этот действующий, запускать не все. Потому что я запустил 4-часовую, и она была легкая, но ломалась. Вот легкую часовую. Ужасно она пошла хорошо. Кораблей, так понимаю, до 5 можно забрать. А вот что значит красные точечки, я так понимаю. А, возможно, это негативные компоненты. Хотя я до сих пор не понимаю. Везде негативные компоненты или что-то у нас. Яйца, что одна бэшка. Кажется, не более лично. Да, может до 5, видимо. Топливо требуется 50 тонн. Я не понимаю, откуда берется топливо. Как я вроде бы у меня был 200 тонн, но куда оно какой-то запас дается или куда еще. До кораблей тоже можно посмотреть какая-то там информация. Я тут не все понимаю. Апгрейд модуля непонятно тоже откуда бывать. Что-то еще нужно делать. Кстати, а почему культи повысилось? Было меньше. Либо это вот с учетом моего флота, что ли? Ну ладно. Что получится. Пустилось. Соответственно, можно прогресс смотреть в комнатке. Идет. Здесь можно посмотреть корабли. Вот это вот я не понимаю, что за штука. 13%. Может быть, для следующего ранка, для апгрейда. Ну, нет, тоже не похоже. Непонятно, что это за значение. А это 0%. Хотя у нас миссия она была неудачной. Наверное, текущей миссией является только Exploration, я понимаю. Сама на 47. Не видно сколько денег, но там мало. конечно, лучше обкалить. Нужно какой-то новый способ нормально получить доходов найти. Так, связи все время. Мне не хватает видео. Сегодня запас всяких полезных вещей. Ставить, чтобы повторялся. Так, ремонт потом. Стоит это делать. Может, стоит здесь добавки поставить целую кучу с баз 50. Так что, в принципе, удобно использовать, тренировать. Можно было одну комнату поставить, было бы. Мне будет какой-нибудь рецепт производства чего-нибудь сложного. Топливо. Не понимаю, где у нас запас топлива. Почему они запускают вроде без топлива? Где лучше топливо? Не понимаю, как оно будет. Это для кого-то реквест, а? Ага. Тоже не сильно поесть еще. Нужна? Ты что это? Так, это осита на столе. О, чуть 15 минут стоит. Неплохо. Интересно. Стоит она больше фабрик. Давай. А, вот с этой сетью умеет делать. Причем не сложно. Или на стороне. Там, о, сам же тоже могу делать. Да, в принципе, так что могу делать. Смотри, конечно, не серьезно. Еще обычного не видел. Кстати, на спас перейти вот корабль, в ангаре поставить хочу. Пойди пока не повыключу.
He's going to drop this evil alien thing into the American public without somebody writing an article and saying there's another side to this story. And whether I'm right or wrong, I said you had to balance the story. So I started as an article. I was going to just fight this evil alien thing and say Tom DeLonge is putting this out, and if it's in a vacuum, a lot of people are just going to buy into this thing and go along with this. We're going to use nuclear weapons and stuff. And then when I suddenly got confirmation that he did have the witnesses, and Chris Bledsoe was confirming that who some of these people were, and the fact that this is for real. This is a real deal guy, and what he wanted to do. Everything he's doing disclosure, but Tom DeLonge isn't doing disclosure. He's doing the money deal. So he's got a media corporation called To the Stars, and he wants it like a Star Wars thing. He wants the toys, he wants multiple series, multiple books, and he's going to control all these UFO stories and make piles of money out of this, and at the same time get the story out. So fine if he wants to do that, but I want to fight this evil alien thing, and plus the fact I wanted to tell people this is nothing new, folks. They're just running the same deal that they ran before. So what I did is set up the book, and in the book the way I set it up is I say there are an analogy. First I say I call the book Managing Magic, the government's UFO disclosure plan. And I've been involved since the 80s through a number of these programs where I knew the people that were in it, and they just run the same thing. So, and Jacques Vallée first started this back in, I think, the 1970s or 80s. He said, I'd be very surprised if this turned out to be just ET. And I used to think it was nuts. I thought, what are you talking about, you know? And now I sort of understand what he's talking about, because you get a lot of orbs. The number one mentioned being is not an alien. It's not a gray. It's not a human type alien. It's a ball of light or an etheric type being. It's the number one reported thing. So it has this element that not all ETs are flesh and blood. So I sort of made this shift on the ET front. So the way I set it up is I said it was called Managing Magic, and this is the way I think they look at it. For example, in the CIA, if you look at some of the people that have talked about it, the word they use is phenomenology. And when you see, they released, just at the end of the Obama administration, they released all these documents, these UFO documents, but they came along with the remote viewing documents. They were all together. And that's the thing. It's not just, it's this across the spectrum that people are parsing. So they're saying there's remote viewing, then there's experiencers, and then the experiencers say to me, we're not channelers. Don't call us channelers. We're not, channelers are faking it. And then there's remote viewing people, and then there's psychic people, and then you have all these different components. And what I came to sort of believe myself, right or wrong, it's all the same thing. It's all this component of the fact that it's not a physical world, and it sort of maybe will coalesce into a physical environment or a vibration, but that all these other vibrations, it's all the same thing. They're all, we're just parsing things that should be parsed, and that when you understand it, it's phenomenology. So that's why I called it Managing Magic, that the more accurate term is that this is magic. They discovered magic, because when they recovered the Roswell crash, the alien, they recovered a live alien, and it was telepathic. So it's not just, it had this other component of all this weird, you know, what is the universe, how does things work? So I call it Managing Magic. And the way I set up the book was I set it up that the way I see it is that you have, the government wants to get this stuff out, but you can't, you have there's three options. The government, if they wanted to disclose, would go to the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, and Fox News. And they would just say, here, we're taking you on a tour, show them the bodies, show them the craft, move them to the next room, the president's standing there, whatever questions you want to ask, whatever you need to ask, we're going to disclose. But they're not doing that. It's very evident they're not doing that. The other thing is, people say, well, they're covering up. And I said, well, no, they're not covering up. Because if they want to cover up, they do exactly what the Canadians did in 1967. The Canadians released all the UFO files, and then they just shut up. What's the Canadian government doing with UFOs? And there's nobody, I mean, I've been in this for 4 years, nobody has any idea what they're doing. They don't talk about it. This phenomena of leaking stories is totally a U.S. phenomenon. It doesn't happen in Great Britain, it doesn't happen in Australia, it doesn't happen in Belgium, it doesn't happen in Russia, it doesn't happen in China. It all happens in the United States, where you have these people leaking documents, leaking stories, whistleblowers, all that sort of stuff. It's uniquely an American phenomenon. Everybody else is just shutting up, and nobody knows what's going on. So if they were to cover this thing up, they wouldn't be leaking the stories. And I was involved in one of the key stories that confirms that they're not covering up, and that was the story of the Holloman Air Force Base film. This is one of the stories I put in the book. To say they're covering up, you've got to explain this. 1969, the U.S. government, Air Force, shuts down Blue Book, and they say, okay, CIA is already out of it. They've already said, we're not interested in UFOs, we don't study UFOs. 1969, the U.S. Air Force shuts it down, and when I say they're not shutting it down, they're moving it into the black world. They're shutting down the white world to allow them to research in the black world without having to answer for every stupid UFO sighting. And so they shut it down, and 1969, they're off the books. They say there's no ET, there's no cover-up, there's no evidence of withholding documents, that sort of stuff, and no national security implications. And that's it. So they shut it down, and in 1973, they go to Bob Emenegger and Alan Sandler, two producers in Los Angeles, and they ask them to do a UFO documentary. They have 8 documentaries, defense documentaries, and at the end, we want you to do this other one on UFOs. And Bob Emenegger is a total UFO skeptic, said, "What, you mean this is for real?" And at that point, the security manager, Paul Shargle, at Norton Air Force Base, said, "What would you say if I told you that we had landed, that an alien ship landed at Holloman Air Force Base, 6 o'clock in the morning in May of 1971, and we filmed it from 3 different vantage points, 2 on the ground, 1 in a helicopter, and we will allow you to use the film for your documentary." So here you go, and what Bob said is, he's still not interested in UFOs. He watches Comedy Channel, he's not interested in UFOs. He said, these people are all crazy, there's no cover-up. I was able to go wherever I want. He went into the Pentagon without signing in. He was able to go and talk to all the Blue Book heads. He was talking to Art Lundahl, who was the big CIA guy for UFOs. Stuff he said was no cover-up. I could ask wherever I want. It was true. He could ask wherever he wants. So he puts his documentary, and then what happens at the end of the documentary is they say, we can't use the film. We can't let, it's Watergate, it's bad timing, we can't allow you to use the film, and they pull the film. And at least that's what I thought. Then when the film gets released, it's a documentary called UFOs, Past, Present, and Future. $250,000 from the MacArthur Foundation. And then the MacArthur people say, MacArthur's having trouble with his friends. He's getting a hard time doing this UFO thing. We'd like you to pull his name from the credits. But you can give him money. And so here it works. So they get the money. It's a secret source for the money. Comes in. And then they put the documentary out. And then I find out that there's 8 seconds of Holloman Air Force Base film in the film. So Bob's my friend. I put on the bus. There's 8 seconds of film in there. And he goes, well, yeah. And I said, you told me they pulled the film. You told me it was sent back to the Pentagon. And he said, well, Dave, you told me this whole story about the guy going across the country in this small dance and taking the film back to the Pentagon. I said, but there's 8 seconds of film in the documentary. And then he said, what did he say? But he didn't show it. And he said, no, he said, it's background. And I said, background? What do you mean it's background? And he said, it didn't show anything. And what it is you see the hills of Holloman, and you see this object, this brilliantly lit object at 6 o'clock in the morning coming over the hills, but it's in a distance. So you don't see it close up, and you don't see the alien when the alien gets out. That's the classified parts. I want you to know that Holloman happened, and they allowed them to use this 8 seconds of the film. But the rest of the film, the classified part was pulled. So they use these sort of tricks. So they're not covering up, and they're not disclosing, which means they're doing something in between, which is what I got dragged into with Bob Emenegger, Bill Moore, Stephen Greer leaking the story, but they're protecting the classified material. So the way I set up the book was I call them the Messiahs, and then the magicians, ethical magic. presidential briefers, 5 or 6. There's Arthur Lundell, who was the original guy who briefed the president from 1954 to 1969. He was involved with Bob Emenegger. Then there's Kit Green, who's presently today still working on a project with witnesses, UFO witnesses that have been injured. And this is according to Annie Jacobson, who just investigative reporter who just released a book called Phenomena, very prominent investigative reporter, and she had a long interview with Kit, so Kit's still involved. He was involved till 83, and then the key guy who I got involved with was Ron Pandolfi. And Ron Pandolfi has been sort of, they call it the keeper of the weird, the head of the CIA UFO desk from 1983, and he still is running the show. And then you have a guy by the name of Jim Semivan, who was a presidential briefer for the president, who retired from the CIA in 2007, and is still involved. And this is how this game is played, is that a lot of these people are retired from the CIA, but as Chase Brandon, who is one of the magicians I said, he said, it's like Hotel California. You can check out, but you can't leave. And all CIA people continue to work on their contract. They're just no longer with the CIA, and they do contract work. So Kit Green's was under contract. He's still under contract. Ron Pandolfi's still active. We don't really know what position he has, but apparently he's so powerful that he can't even be fired. They can't touch him. Nobody can touch him. He's that powerful. And so I have Jim Semivan. What people don't realize, when it comes to this sort of thing, people think like there's a cover-up. But what they forget is that if 10% of people on the outside world are experiencers, there's 10% experiencers in high-level government. And this was confirmed. Jim Semivan is one of them. Jim Semivan was a presidential briefer until 2007 when he retired. And he had an experience in the 1990s. And he woke up, and his wife was bleeding. They're in the room, and the beings were in the room. And his description, he wrote a forward to one of Tom DeLonge's books. He said, it shattered my idea of reality. And he said, the idea that you can measure this thing, and this comes down to this material, was this a nuts and bolts thing? He said, and this is a guy who's presidential briefer, who would have gotten some sort of briefing as to what's going on, said, how do you, the idea that you can measure this thing is laughable. How do you measure something where there doesn't appear to be any there? This has got to do with phenomena or multidimensional stuff that our science has no idea what to do. So he's involved. So I have him as one of the people, and he's running some of these operations that where I believe they're disclosing stuff. And then you have Jim Wosley, who was with Stephen Greer. Stephen Greer did the briefing, and he apparently went with Ron Pandolfi in December to brief Donald Trump, along with a guy by the name of Mike Pillsbury. And these three guys did the briefing, talked to Donald Trump about what was going on. So I have the 14 magicians, and most of them are contract CIA guys who they bring back out of retirement. And that's the way they work it. So you're not going to use a white world guy who's on the books of the CIA. You're going to have a guy who's off, who's in the black world in that contract. This is all plausible deniability. It's all plausible deniability. So I have the 14 magicians, and in the book I actually named 20 CIA. I named with Bob Emenegger. One of the stories he was given is a 1959 channeling of an alien at the place where they analyze all the U2, the SR-71, and all the satellite photographs. One of the most highly classified CIA buildings there is. And they actually channel an alien in 1959, in July of 1959. And the document was produced to me by Jacques Vallée. I put the first copy in the first page in the book, and it lists all the CIA people who were in the meeting that they had about it, talking about this channeling that they did. So here again, you have a story. This is a story that nobody knew about. This channeling of this alien in 1959, so why would you release it unless you want it out? Now the key is plausible deniability. So the document I got was a handwritten version of that document, which would provide the actual CIA memo, the type memo. We didn't see, but we've got the written document. So you have these things where you can sort of drag out of it. So you got the 14 magicians, and then I got the key is the 5 messiahs. So I've got Stephen Greer. I've got Tom DeLonge, I've got Dan Smith, and most of them I say you have to have multiple sources. Like Stephen Greer claims 540, Tom DeLonge claims 10, Bill Moore had 24, Bill Moore was one of the messiahs, and then I have a guy by the name of Dan Smith, and Dan Smith is the best friend of Ron Pandolfi. that's his only source. But I give him the credit because he's got he's got 26 years of conversations with him. And the way it works is Dan says, I know him, he's the godfather to his child, he's his best man at his second wedding, and Ron will just, he'll be talking, and Ron will say something about what's going on. For example, he'll say, I was looking around, and he gets briefed on this thing, and I realized that the group that's Office of Naval Intelligence, and everybody above a flag officer to Office of Navy Intelligence gets a briefing. And he'll only say it one time. It's according to Dan Smith. He'll only say it one time. So if I phone up Ron Pandolfi and I say, oh, you told Dan Smith about this thing about off-beat Navy Intelligence, he said, I never said any such thing. It's all plausible deniability. You're not allowed to tape him. You're not allowed to reproduce his emails. So it's all verbal. And he can always deny this sort of thing. So I've got, these are the five. So I've got Dan Smith, Stephen Greer, Bill Moore, and DeLong. And they all have one thing, a number of things in common. The number one thing they have is they have massive egos. And that's how they hook them. So what happened is, with Bill Moore, the prime example of Bill Moore is he has this he's got legitimate witnesses, he's exposed to the Roswell crash, the thing starts to unfold, so he gets a phone call from Alfred, starts on the phone line, Alfred, he actually was Richard Doty. Richard Doty says, you're the only guy who knows what you're talking about. And of course, Bill Moore, yeah, that's true. And then he said, well, I need to talk to you. And Bill's kind of on tour, but busy. He continues on a tour, and he gets a phone call from Alfred Air Force Base a couple of days later, a week later, or whatever. And the guy, he's a lieutenant colonel, he's in the Defense Intelligence Agency. I just discovered this a couple of days ago who this guy was. And he phones up and he said, and they're coming off an air of a show, they're coming off here. And then he says, the guy says, well, there's a call, somebody's got a call, I'm going to talk to you. And so he picks up the phone, they're already off the air. And the guy says, I'm whatever from Alfred Air Force Base, Office of Naval Intelligence. You're the only guy who knows what you're talking about. And Bill says, yeah, that's true. And that's how they hook him. That's how they set him. He's the only guy who knows. And so he's got the sources. They give him all these sources. And it's the same thing. He's got to get permission every time he wants to talk about something. He can't reproduce their material. And they told him, we're going to give you information, and we're going to give you disinformation. And it's up to you to figure out which is which and separate the wheat from the chaff. But of course, if you're an egotistical guy, you're going to say, oh, I can do that, no problem. And that's a mistake that Bill Moore made. That's where they got him, is that when some disinformation got into the field and everybody realized it was disinformation and it had come from Bill Moore, he was dead in the water. Because then they're saying, you're working, and it's the old story. Bill said, I wasn't working for the CIA. I was working with the CIA. And the thing is, there's almost every researcher has gotten a source like that. This guy's giving me material. They're doing the same thing. So they compromise people. They say, I've got something. I'm from whatever intelligence agency, and I've got this, but you can't identify me. And it's the same game. So they give you the stuff. It's plausible deniability. You're never allowed to answer your source. So I have these five messiahs, and these are guys. The other thing about this is they all absolutely believe they're messiahs. They absolutely believe that they have been called to release this story to the world, that they got picked. So when you talk to Tom DeLong and say, oh, you're being used. No, I'm not being used. No. These guys are my friends. Bill Moore will say the same thing. And yet you have opposite views. For example, Bill Moore will say, not Bill Moore, but Stephen Greer will say, all aliens are good. And the government is evil. The government is withholding this thing. And Tom DeLong says exactly the opposite. He said the government is the good guys, and they're saving us from these evil aliens, and I support the good guys. And then you get Dan Smith, who's his view, and his plausible deniability is he's an eschatologist, so he's into the end of the world. He's got all this religious stuff, blogs, and most of the stuff is religious stuff. And when you read him, you go like, oh, I can't read this guy. Just like, oh, he makes my head spin. And because he's into this eschatology thing. But when I talked to him, I said, well, did Ron talk to you about this kind of stuff? He said, no, we've never talked about religion. We've never talked about that kind of stuff. Never. And I said, well, you talked to his wife, because Ron Pandolfi's wife is actually involved as well. And he said, well, yeah, we had one conversation on camera where we were talking about she's a Muslim and he's a Christian. And but he said it was a very surface conversation about religion. So his thing is that the government doesn't talk about that kind of stuff. So that's my impression, that the government will never talk about who the others, as they're described to Tom DeLonge, who the others are, or whether they're good, or whether they're evil, or what their intentions. That's never part. So that may be part of the classified stuff. They just give you all this other stuff as to how it operates, or what the crafts are, or how this thing is being funded, or stuff like that. But that part is never discussed. So the Messiah brings his message into it and believes that the government is carrying his message, and they're not. So they're being, I wouldn't say they're being used. People have said they're being used. I say they're being managed. They're being managed to put on a story. The significant part that got me dragged back into this thing, because I didn't want to be a part of this thing again. I got dragged back in because of the Hillary Clinton thing. I had written the Hillary Clinton book, and I had done the presidents. And when Hillary got involved, and then suddenly Tom DeLonge was named with John Podesta, her campaign manager, I got dragged back in because I realized, like, I've seen this. People have to know that this has happened. Like in the book, I list year by year, and almost every year I can pick up a story where it says this is a government leak. For example, Walt Disney, 1956. Exactly the same story as Bob Emenegger. He's asked to do a documentary, and he'd done a lot of documentaries for the U.S. government during World War II. So Disney does this documentary. He's going to get all the film and the stuff at the end. They pull the film. Same story. So he puts out the documentary, and you have the Serpo story. You have all these sort of stories that are dragging the UFO community, and they're gradually leaking it. The thing that's changed, and this has actually been described to me, is that in January of 2016, something happened. At that point, they suddenly decided they have to get this out. Now, I don't know what's happened, whether there's some sort of event they know is coming, whatever it is, but suddenly they are in, like, hyper mode to get this story out. What I've been told, and I'm getting it from multiple sources, is that there's multiple teams. I always thought it was just like a government disclosure, like there's one guy, there's one program. I'm told there are 6 teams. The one source says 6 teams that are doing this, and I know that Jim Semivan, who is the CIA guy, is running Tom DeLonge's operation, and Tom's 10 people, and what they're going to do is they're going to put the stuff through Hollywood, which is the best way to get the story. I think the way they see to get the story out is you put it in a fictionalized version, so that if you're a skeptic or you're the person on the street, you turn the TV on and you think you're watching a movie, and subconsciously they're downloading the message that they want to get. So that's the main thing. That's where Tom DeLonge was talked about, and what Tom DeLonge is going to come. And it looks like they've had trouble because Chris Bledsoe pulled out of their operation. And I was bugging Chris Bledsoe because he doesn't believe in the evil alien thing. And I said, well, what are you doing? Because he had experience with angels, which shows that it may be not just all ET. His thing has it has aliens, but it also has this angel figure, which is a very high prominent part of his story. And I said, did the shining lady, the angel, did she tell you that there was evil aliens? He said, well, no. I said, well, what do you want Tom DeLonge? And he pulled out. So I think what's happened with Tom DeLonge is there's an operation. I heard $1 billion was going to get dropped into this thing, that one of the richest people in the world, and I could have got the name if I wanted, but I always wanted to stay on the outside. I didn't want to force my sources to give me stuff. I just would say, I told them, I'm listening, everything's on the record, I would just listen, and when people would talk, I would listen to what they're saying, but I didn't really go and say, I was told about the fact that there was this guy who's one of the richest people in the world is backing this operation, and I could have forced the name out, and I figured, no, I don't want to force it out, because that's their thing. But $200 million has already been collected, and what he's going to come out with, because everyone's waiting for the big announcement, and the big announcement is going to be to deal with this media thing with the toys and all this stuff, and it's going to be Spielberg, J.J. Abrams as director, and they're going to run 100 episodes, but because Chris has pulled out, there's about a dozen episodes that have been pulled from that. And that may be why there's sort of a hang-up on this thing. But that's what they're going to spin, is this. And I've heard $1 billion. I've heard that Jacques Vallée looks like series. Like a series is going to run for 5 years, from what I heard. And Steven Spielberg is the key name I've heard. I've heard J.J. Abrams as the director. And then I heard that they're going to have a sighting thing where, I don't know if you remember back, one of the big stories that they dropped was 1988. The government ran a UFO documentary. It went through Fox, and it was called UFO cover-up live. And everybody that saw it said it was the worst documentary we've ever seen. This is the one that introduced the live alien, it introduced Area 51, it introduced the DIA parapsychology program. It was on a flowchart, and all these ideas were dropped. But everybody said, it was terrible. People were reading off scripts. They were reading off cue cards. And they were forced to read off these cue cards, even though it was their story, and they're reading their story off a cue card. And the reason they did that is because they don't want you going off script. They got this script, which is approved by the government. We're going to put this in the final days of the Reagan administration, which is the same thing with the documents, $12 million, 12 million pages of documents, CIA documents on remote viewing and UFOs were released in the final days of the Obama administration. So as he leaves, he drops this stuff into the thing, and that's what happened with this UFO documentary. And so you have these multiple things that are being managed and put out there, and most of it's going through Hollywood. Like the Bledsoe thing is also going to be going through Hollywood. And then the big thing came down where they got these 6 teams going. There's multiple operations. I'm being told this is for real. The Tom DeLonge thing's for real. And I was told it's not going to be full disclosure, but it's going to be big. You can't believe it. I would hear these words. You can't believe it. This is going to be big. This is massive. For this year's 31st Ozark Mountain UFO Conference, which is still just amazes me that sometimes it's wonderful. So our final speaker for this conference this year is he became involved in ufology as the Vietnam War ended back in May of 1975 with a personal sighting of UFO-type objects, which locally became known as the Charlie Red Star, a recurring UFO flap that was happening in this area. These sightings led to a decade of research into the early 1950s works done by the Canadian government into the flying saucer phenomenon. This also caused him to become the authority on the Canadian government program, and Wilbur B. Smith, that's hard to say, Wilbert B. Smith, who headed that program up. This led to an investigation of the role in the UFO cover-up by the former president of Penn State University. So our next speaker didn't just go, hey, I want to go out and start investigating UFOs. He just jumped right in and started challenging government officials and, finding out the really good and hard to get information. So that takes an awful lot of courage to look after the stuff that he has dedicated his life to. So this resulted in a book called UFOs, Area 51 in the Government, which was published in 1991. He proceeded to do almost 3 decades of research into the role of the President of the United States in the UFO mystery. He's considered the world expert on this subject. He's from Canada. Figure that out. Okay? So it's actually cool because it's better that he did that and looked at our presidents than one of us, really. And it did cause some controversy. A couple of years ago, he had problems getting across the border to come down here and speak at this conference, and we had to do like a FaceTime thing. So it's if you don't think that they're paying attention and trying to silence people who do this kind of research, they do. So after his decades of research, most of that research on the presidents can be found on his website, which is www.presidentialufo.com, and in his recently published book, The Clinton UFO Storybook. After experiencing a mental download event on February 26, 2012, he turned his research interest away from his new research has expanded to the possible involvement of extraterrestrials in modern music and the phenomenon of inspiration, and downloads in scientific discoveries, inventions, Nobel Prizes, art, books,
which is the basis for a new series on Gaia TV. He's lectured widely in Canada, the United States, and Europe. He's appeared on many television documentaries on UFOs and interviewed on nearly 100 radio shows, including a number of appearances on Coast to Coast AM. In 2013, when he was one of 40 witnesses to testify in front of 6 ex-senators and congressmen in Washington for the citizens' hearing UFO on disclosure, and he was one of 6 UFO experts who testified in front of a panel of reporters from Brandon, Ontario for the first public hearing on UFOs in Canada. He is the recipient of the International Researcher Award and the UFO Congress Researcher Award. His books include recently released Alien Bedtime Stories, which is 72 articles on UFOs as they relate to the president's consciousness abductions and positions. He is preparing to release the book Managing Magic, the Government's UFO Disclosure Plan, and Tales of Charlie Red Star, which details one of the largest UFO flags in history. As you know, in the last couple of years, there's a few people that have been talking a lot about disclosure and about UFOs being real in relation to the government. Like Tom DeLonge is one of these folks. The CIA and the Pentagon have openly been hinting to the public that UFOs exist. And that we're not alone in the universe. At the same time, a key CIA official has been hinting that portal technology is real and it exists. And a group called the Cosmic Club has arisen. And this is like new stuff. I don't know this kind of context talking about portals. So this is groundbreaking stuff. And there's events that have happened just in the last week.
Okay, I am honored. I used to speak here quite often in the old days, and as I've told numerous people, most of the conferences are in Nevada, California, and I always say to them when I'm there, you're Victoria Springs. And I say, don't die until you've been to Victoria Springs. I've lectured at almost every conference there is in America. I've lectured in Europe. This is potentially the best conference in the world. I can tell you that. And so I say thank you for giving me the invite to come. It's one of the closest ones for me, even though it's still a 16-hour drive. And I appreciate the fact that you lowered the temperature today so I can feel at home. Actually, as Forrest mentioned, that I have material that has just happened. And so I've been changing the lecture in the last couple of days. I've been changing stuff, and I actually changed the title late last night. So what I'm calling it now is The Disclosure Circus and the Experience of Truth. I was just going to talk about the Tom DeLonge operation, because that's basically what people want to know. They want to know what the New York Times article, the Washington Post, Tom DeLonge. Is there going to be disclosure? What's the government doing? And I have been very involved. The way I play the game is I have 100 people on the list that I think should know what's going on. That it's important to listen to these people when they talk. So basically, I see it as a chess game. I was very, very good as a child playing chess. And I quit playing because I never wanted to lose. So I didn't go to try to do the Grandmaster thing or whatever. But the way I see the UFO phenomena is, for me, is that you are playing the game, and the most important part about playing chess is you have to know what your opponent is doing. It doesn't really matter what you're going to do. You do not make a move until you know why the guy across from you is that he did. If he's an ordinary player and doesn't know what he's doing, well then he probably doesn't know what he's doing. But he's a very good player, and he moved the piece for a reason. So what I have is I have these 100 people. I keep track of everything they say. This includes very high-level people in the CIA, in defense, this sort of thing. And my other rule is I always stay one step removed from my victim. So I never, ever interact with any of these people. The only one I'll interact with and says, I'm going to tell you this, but you got to keep it off the record. You're my friend and all this kind of stuff. I don't want that. So what I'm saying is pretty independent in terms of people will know that when you tell me something, you might as well stand on the street corner and say it, because I don't really hold anything back. So the first part is called the disclosure circus, and this is a circus. It is very frustrating. I've said numerous times, this disclosure part of my research, I'd like to get out of it. I'd like to quit. I think 3 times a day. I got to quit this thing. This is an absolute nightmare. Because what they're doing is they're taking information and they're putting disinformation around it, and they're putting it out and it bounces around, and this is how they're doing it. But then I was talking to people over the weekend, and as was mentioned in the intro, I had a download experience which absolutely changed my life, where a lot of the UFO community sort of wrote me off as having lost it and gone to the woo-woo side. And what I said to them, I said, well, I didn't actually choose to go there. I was sort of dragged there. It was nothing that I did. It was something that happened to me. And so I've talked to experiencers, and as I've added this part to the end. And so I was talking to people at the book table where I'm sitting beside Nancy. I'll tell you, the only drawback in this speech that I had to do it after Nancy, it's the first time that woman has ever delivered a speech. And she brought a tear to my eye a couple of times. It was like very powerful. So at my table, I had a lot of experiencers come to me. And as I'll point out, I've added this sort of section to the end. I'm going to show you what former government officials are doing with experiencers. And it's very encouraging. And I wanted to add that to give it sort of an uplift, because what I say, and I will say this probably a couple times in the lecture, unless you talk to experiencers and what they're saying, these are the people. The way I define an experiencer is someone who interacts with the intelligence behind the phenomena. Unless you talk to those people, you will never solve the UFO mystery. We have been doing the nuts and bolts, measure, and all this kind of stuff for 70 years. We have gotten absolutely nowhere. Most people will say they don't know what's going on. When you talk to the experiencers, they will talk to you. The government may not talk to you. The experiencers will talk to you. So I want to add some stuff at the end that talks about some experiencer research that may be very encouraging to the experiencers in this room. So let's go, see if this works. Okay, this is my book called Managing Magic. This was written before this latest circus started with Tom DeLonge. I actually do write quite a bit in here about Tom DeLonge. And why I call it Managing Magic, because basically it's not UFOs. If you understand what's going on, it's magic. It's what they call the CIA phenomenology. So it's remote viewing, near-death experiences, ghosts, psychic phenomena, channeling, it's people who are tapped in, UFOs. It's all the same thing. It's all tied in. And when you understand the phenomena, what's behind this, you start to understand why this stuff is happening. So this is the book that I wrote. And I'm working on a second book, and then I say, okay, I'm going to do this one more, and I'm getting out of here, because I want to get back to the experience of consciousness stuff. But I keep getting dragged back in. I got dragged back in on Wednesday. We had come in early. We were in Conway at the archives there. Desta had joined me, and we were here. And suddenly I showed her my cell phone, and I think we were in the archives at the time, and this is Dan Smith, and he's sort of an indirect spokesman for a guy named Dr. Ron Pandolfi, who is rumored to be the guy who briefed Donald Trump on UFOs, and may have briefed the last 6 presidents on UFOs. He's been in the CIA since 1983. He supposedly runs the Weird Desk, which is the phenomenology, all the weird stuff, and head of the CIA UFO desk. What he does, the way he put the story out, so what Pandolfi does, he puts stuff to Dan Smith. He's been doing it since 1991. Dan Smith was his best man for his second wedding. He puts his stuff out. Dan says, I sit there, now listen, he'll only say it one time. He'll leak something, he'll say it one time. And if anybody asks him, oh, Ron said this, he'll say, no, Dan Smith's making it up. Dan Smith's crazy. Dan Smith does have some weird things. He believes in eschatology. Sometimes he believes like he's Jesus or he's God, he's a Messiah, and he's got two physics degrees, but he has this belief in the eschatology, the Bible, and this sort of stuff. So a lot of people say that's that. And that's what they do, plausible deniability. They give it to people who people will say, well, and sidelines. So Wednesday, we're in the archives, and the phone rings, and it's Dan Smith. So I'm not, I usually don't answer phone calls. So then Katarina's sitting right in the front row here, and so then he's got the old brand, something has happened. Now, this is the story I'm going to be making phone calls to Katarina. Well, this is what he put out on, they post on Open Minds Forum. So he put out, we need to figure out what's going on and why, and who has a need to know. Many of you know for many years I have been laboring under the impression that I was in charge of disclosure. These people, in Magic, I call these people the messiahs. Stephen Brewer is one, Tom DeLonge is one, Dan Smith is one. They actually believe their role is to bring disclosure to the world. They firmly believe this, so they think we can call them messiahs. The filmed incident that may have occurred last night, so this is Wednesday, he posts, so the incident occurred Tuesday night. The filmed incident that may have occurred last night may be the test case for disclosure protocol. That's what's being discussed by the stakeholders at the present time. So let me know what happened. There's a guy named Joe Firmage. He was a .com executive in the 1990s, had a $3 billion computer company. One night he has a being appear in his room. And the being is a human type being, like an angelic type being, and this guy's Mormon, which sort of ties into this. And the being, they're talking about the technology to go into space. And the being basically sort of says to him, and this is on Joe Firmage's YouTube channel, he only has about six videos there, and 2 of them are I need to watch. So he says to him, why should we help you with this technology or whatever? And so Joe Firmage is this super powerful .com guy, says, because I'm willing to die for it. I guess he gets some sort of impression that he's got a download, that something has happened. He basically walks out, quits his job, CEO, just basically shuts it down, starts putting money into UFOs. He starts putting money into portal technology, into sort of, some people have sort of laughed and said he's building a portal to Mormon heaven, because Mormons have this belief of this planet, and this ties into the UFO thing. So he's building this thing, and apparently put in $90 million. And the story sort of went there, and I would talk to people in Salt Lake, and I'd say, does he have a portal? I'm trying to figure this out. Does he have a portal? Because a portal changes everything. If there's a portal, the nuts and bolts materialistic paradigm of the world is in serious, serious trouble. And I'd say that's why ufology has never gotten anywhere, is because they still buy into the materialistic paradigm. Oh, nuts and bolts, that's all it is. Consciousness is an illusion and all this kind of nonsense. And so I say it's not part of the portal technology is for real. If you can actually walk through a portal and you're suddenly in another world, everything's changed. Then we have some serious problem with reality. We got to figure out what's actually going on here. So the rumor was that Firmage was working on this portal technology. So I'd ask people in Salt Lake City, and they'd say, you know, he's a crooked businessman. I said, well, I think most businessmen are like that. Does he have a portal? And then they'd say, well, you know, he's got a drinking problem. Yeah, and he had 3 impaired charges. And I said, okay, that's fine, but does he have a portal? I don't care what he does in his spare time. I just want to know, does he have a portal? So the story that I had actually given up last week, I said, this is a total waste of time. And this is what happens in these things, because they're putting it out, they're pulling it back. They're putting it out, they're pulling it back. So the story's out there, and I actually got Ron Pendolfi on camera talking about this portal thing. The only time he's ever been caught on camera. And he pulled the video, but I had it already. So this thing was going, and then I'd given up, because I said, oh, it never turns out. The stuff they put out never gets confirmed. Whereas Tom DeLonge, which I'm going to talk about, some of the stuff actually did come out. So Tuesday night, well, no, let me backstep 1 week. So Dan Merritt, who is a former U.S. congressman from the state of Utah, and this is where this is happening in Salt Lake City, gets involved in the program. And Firmage is out of money. He has these problems, these charges against him for whatever. And so Dan Merritt gets involved, and he's been retired for a number of years. He gets involved. He puts $4 million in. And the story is, as of about a week and a half ago, is they've perfected the technology. Now, it's on his YouTube site. You'll see it. They call it the bouncing box. And it's a cage type thing that sits there, and they have these like gyros in it, and they're all spinning in different directions. And they're going faster and faster and faster and faster. And all of a sudden the box starts to vibrate and actually sort of levitates off the ground. So the dispute was, is this technology that Firmage has, is it gravity control, anti-gravity, or is it a portal? So from all the stuff I've gotten in his ear, God, he's have a portal. So that's misinformation. So he doesn't have a portal. He's just working on this gravity thing. so they can't get a hold of me. So they go to my associate, Katerina, who now lives in Washington. And I'm sorry, Katerina, I got you dragged into this rabbit hole, but they now go to her. And I have a couple of people, as I said, I'm always one step removed from people I'm watching. And so now they go to Katerina. And if they can't get a hold of me, they go to Katerina and say, we need to get a message to Grant. And this is what happened. So they were contacting her, and they were contacting an artist friend of mine, Doug Alt, in New Jersey, and they're trying to say something has happened at the Salt Lakes, at the thing. And I got the impression that they'd gotten a film. And during the film, they were filming this, they had this thing spinning away, and a guy by the name of Kevin Albert was there. And Kevin Albert works for Ron Pandolfi. The original story was that Kevin Albert was a producer in Hollywood. Kevin Albert was going to put out a documentary on all these, what they call the Avery figures, these people that had interacted with UFO phenomena inside the government. They were going to put out this documentary, and Kevin Albert was going to make this documentary. And he offered me an executive producer, and I said, nah, I don't really want to do that. I said, if you want help, I'll tell you whatever I know, whatever, but I don't really want to be involved. And then he said, well, you can be on the outside, you can be on the inside, you can get 100%, you know all the phone calls, you know exactly what we're going to do. Or you can be on the outside and you get 10 to 15%. And I said, okay, I'll take 10 to 15%. I just don't want to get dragged into, you can't talk about this phone call stuff. So I was on the outside, but I still knew sort of what they were doing. And at one point, I'm talking to him, and I said, this portal thing, Ron's talking about this portal thing, this crazy stuff. He said, oh no, that part's real. And I said, what? The portal? I thought it was like science fiction. I thought it was like nonsense. But it was extremely important. Once I heard Kevin Albert say, he said, yeah, I've been through a portal, and Joe Furmich had a portal. So I got very interested because it's this consciousness thing. It's this thing that is not as physical as you think it is. So yesterday, Katerina flew in from Washington. So we sat down, and we phoned Dan, and we tried to get the information. I knew it was going to happen. So basically what happens is Tuesday night, we've got this topic, they're there, and apparently Kevin was by himself, and he was filming, and then suddenly a portal, am I correct, Katerina? Sort of a portal thing opened or something happened, and a being appeared, and it was blue or green, it was a blue being appeared, and so I said, so we're trying to get the information, so I said to Dan, okay, so tell me what happened Tuesday night, because he was desperate to get a hold of me, and he wanted me to put it out, and I told him, lecturing in front of a couple hundred people here, what's the deal, what happened? And he said, well, there was an incident, and he sort of starts telling me the story, and then I'm saying, okay, so it was me, so he said, and I said, okay, so what's the telepathic message? And according to Dan, it was, oh, hi, can we help you? And they caught this thing on film, so I know they're not going to release the film. So I said, okay, so I'm speaking, they're probably not going to release it, you're probably not going to release the film. So I said, okay, people are going to ask me, I'm just going to say, okay, why didn't you release the film? So tell me, Dan, why are you guys not going to release the film? And he goes, it might just confuse the situation. Beings and orbs and stuff, and I go, oh, okay, so I'll talk. And then I said, okay, what's your message for these people then? I mean, you wanted to get a hold of me, you wanted to get all this stuff out, and so you're the disclosure guy, what's your message? And he said, well, you tell the people, we say hi to you, we see you and you can see you, no, we say hi to you and you can say hi to us, or something like that. It was some bizarre thing, and I'm like, okay, Dan, so basically, there's no doubt that something happened Tuesday night. So I said to him, I'm trying to get something coffee, so I said, okay, so Ron, see, he's the only operation that most of the people that run today are all retired. That's part of the game. You have to retire before you can play the game. So I said, okay, so Ron saw the film? And he said, yeah, Ron saw the film. And I said, okay, so Ron think it was significant? Do you think it was? Yeah, it was pretty good. And so that's basically all I can tell you what happened Tuesday night. And I said, oh, this is yesterday morning. I said, okay, I'm watching tomorrow morning. If anything happens during the day, please phone me. And you can watch this all on Open Minds Forum. It gets pretty annoying because they're talking about philosophy and stuff like this, but that's how they drop this stuff. They put it on a blog, and even Ron himself, he posts as the footman. He's made 2 postings in the last week, and basically it's rhymes and riddles. It's like a poem, and if you know what's going on, if you know what the lake is, the lake of Salt Lake City, and there's all these sort of things. So that's the latest development that's happened, and this is only one part of this whole stuff that they're leaking out, and they definitely are. There's two teams. So there's the Ron Pandolfi, the CIA guy, and then he has Kevin Albert, he has Dan Smith, his wife, Leah, and they were actually holding meetings. And that's how I got Katerina dragged into this thing. I said, oh, you should come, they're having this meeting, and they're talking about portals, and they're talking, and people would get on, and the wife would actually, talk to people on the internet, and they said they were screening for people, and Katerina ended up being there, and she lives in Washington, so they have a lot of interaction with her, and they were doing this very sort of open thing. So that's the one team. You have the Pandolfi team, then you have the Tom DeLonge team, and there's sort of this competition. I was even asking Darren today, I said, well, you guys said that Tom DeLonge would be gone in 2 years, and you guys would be the guys that bring disclosure. So he said, well, yeah, there's kind of a competition going on, and so you got to remember there's these two teams, but the Tom DeLonge team is pretty a lot more in terms of results than the Pandolfi team. One of the three messages got from aliens. I never get it myself. It's somebody in between me. Chris Bledsoe, who is becoming a very famous contactee, experiencer. Lots of government agencies are watching because he has a very high level of contact experience. And what they do, and the whole thing why I want to talk about experience, the CIA, and I'm not sure Ron said this, but what they said is, because we cannot measure and control the phenomena, we have to resort to watching the people who the phenomena is affecting. And that's why experiencers are so careful to watch, because they're trying to figure out what's going on as well, and they're talking to the government, they're talking to so the thing is, they're very interested in people like Chris Bledsoe. So what he gave me a message, he phoned me the one day and he said, oh, I got a message from the Guardians, which is what he calls the people that he deals with, and he has angelic figures. The Guardians are the ones that were the thing that started. And he said, they got a message for you. I said, oh, okay. He said, their message is that the message is released. I said, you're talking to the wrong guy. You know what? I said, Chris, I have no interest in music whatsoever. I don't play music whatsoever. I have no interest in music. Talk radio now is the local radio. I just don't. I'm not in music. And he said, well, what song you should listen to? Music, Kashmir, what is that? And I go, yeah, okay, whatever it is. And then he said, and the other song is something dragging up rabbit hole. Whoever's behind this thing, dragging up rabbit hole. I have no interest in music. And he said, well, the other song you should listen to is After the Gold Rush by Neil Young. And I went, Neil Young? Neil Young is one. And I didn't know much about music, but I live in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. Most people don't know about it, or don't care. It's the major city in the world. And so the important thing to know is that Neil Young grew up here. So when he said Neil Young, he was part of this UFO message thing. I go, Neil Young. So I went and looked at the song, and it's basically the message of a lot of experiencers saying we're treating the world like a gold rush. And when the gold is gone, it's going to become a ghost town. And the silver seeds, the flying saucers, are going to come down, and they're going to take the chosen ones, which is what Yvonne Smith and the big progressions in Los Angeles calls experiencers, the chosen ones to another planet. And then I was hooked. I went, wow. I mean, this is the message. And I started, and so what I did is I found out that, I don't know, we've got maybe 3 dozen that I suspect major musicians that have been abducted. I go through all the ones, how they get downloads, how they're tapped in. That's what it comes down to. The ability to dissociate. Experiencers either were trained or they learned themselves the ability to dissociate, the same as mediums, the same as psychics, the same as when you're in meditation, the same as when you're being regressed, to dissociate the left rational analytical brain and pop into that world and pull the information back. The musicians are very right brain, and they all, at one point, while I was doing the research, I thought the aliens, intelligence, whatever it is, had every single musician. I was convinced. I was looking at musicians and saying, I wonder if this one was, and they all had something behind them. So that was the book that came out of that whole thing, this bizarre connection between music, and this is the whole idea, that frequency, music is frequency, they're using frequency, they're using lyrics, and that maybe whatever this intelligence is being used to get messages and feeling into the public and change the consciousness of the world. So this is why Magic Guy, 14 magicians on the guys, like Ron Kendall, the guys who were procured 5 they said it was an alien, and he goes on and he does a 2-hour interview, and he refers to high-level CIA guy. It's Ron Pandolfi. So he's using Ron Pandolfi as well, and so, but the Messiahs are the ones that carry it, and then the 3 Kings, I'll skip over that. This is another new development. I see it's like in this field, when it rains, it pours. This is some files that were sent to me. I've got 100 pages of this. It looks like there's about 300 pages. What this is an eyes-only study on the UFO subject for President Johnson. And it was done, and when, I just want to show this slide. I've got 99 pages. I could basically go with what I got now. And there was an 8-man team headed by a guy by the name of Frank Rand, was the guy that ran the program, and he had these high-level government people inside, almost like Tom DeLonge, high-level government people. So when you compare the people from the 1968 study, the Johnson study, to the TSSA, and the TSSA is To the Stars Academy. That's Tom DeLonge. And for people who don't know Tom DeLonge is brought in by Stephen Greer. He flies Stephen Greer to Los Angeles, puts him in contact to make some movie, provide money. He sold 30 million albums. He's a young guy, and he's big on Twitter. He's big on Facebook. He has this access to young kids. So Tom DeLonge is running the one operation, the Eyes Only Study. Now, To the Stars Academy is using the main guy. His name is Jim Semivan. And the key thing to remember, because people will always say, "That's evil government guys," or they're trying to throw us off, whatever. What you have to remember with a lot of these people that are leaking this material is they are experiencers. And Jim Semivan has, I've heard from 2 independent sources that he told the whole story, had the beings in his room in 1992 with his wife, and he was blown away. He said my idea of reality was shattered when that happened. This is a guy who ran covert office for the CIA for 2 years, and this is why I think a lot of these people are involved, because they're trying to figure out what happened to them. He went into the CIA the day after this experience happened, and he went to Ron Pandolfi, and Ron denies his story, but I heard it from a pretty reliable source, and he said, "This happened in my room last night, my wife was bleeding, and this was all going on, and I need to know what happened." And Ron said, "You don't have a need to know." And Jim Semivan said, "I don't have a need to know," because he was a very high-level CIA guy. He said, "You bring your boss, and you don't have a need to know." And they brought in George Tenet, the head of the CIA. And Tenet said to Semivan, he said, "You don't need this. Pretend this is a one-off. Pretend this will never happen again. This will ruin your career. Do not touch this." And so he played the game. The day I was told the day he left the CIA, the truth was exactly what was going on. And he moved from the white world to the black world, and he started to interact with people in the UFO community. He's a guy who's desperate to find out for himself what actually happened. The TSSA is the Tom DeLonge organization, and what happens with him in 2014, he starts to make contact with these people. So if you look at the chart, you look at Jim Semivan is the TSSA. He's the guy that's running the TSSA thing, and I think he reports to Ron Pandolfi. Ron always says, "Well, I don't know who these guys are. It's a little big scam." And then you look at Tom DeLonge's flowchart of his people, and they're all CIA. They're all ex-CIA. And it's like, well, what's the chances that Ron, who's been in the CIA for like 30 years, doesn't know who these CIA people are? Of course he knows who they are. And we were actually told by Jim Semivan, "Oh yeah, he knows what's going on. He's playing stupid because he doesn't want to get dragged into the story. He's actually running it." So you have them, and then the Eyes Only study in 1960s. One of the people on the committee was Arthur Lundahl, who had the same job as Ron Pandolfi. Exactly the same job. So you have that correspondence. The TSSA has Robert Weiss. Robert Weiss is the guy who ran Skunkworks. And Skunkworks is always rumored to be the place they back engineer the flying saucers. So Robert Weiss was feeding Tom DeLonge, and on the other side, to the Eyes Only study, you have Kelly Johnson, who was one of the 8 people on that committee. And then you take a look and you have McCaslin, who was one of Tom DeLonge's, the major general, the main guy who that Tom DeLonge was using at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where he ran the lab, where the Roswell stuff was supposed to be taken. It was a 2-star general, and the Eyes Only study had, from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, James Stewart was a 4-star general on this UFO investigation. Then you have Hal Puthoff, who's the main physicist for Tom DeLonge, and this one, there's the only name that was changed. Lee Brocking was the name they gave him, but he was a high-level physicist in a university in California that was working on there. And then you have a general at NRO. Most people don't know Tom DeLonge has a very high-level general inside the National Reconnaissance Organization. And you take a look in the Eyes Only study, you have Brock Milway, who who was the second head of NRO, who was part of that study. So you've got to have a general at NRO if you're going to do a UFO study. And the National Reconnaissance Organization wasn't even known publicly until 1992, 1993. In 1960s, nobody even knew this organization existed. So you see these parallels. It's almost like every time they do one of these UFO things, they pick the same people from the same organization. So Tom DeLonge started this in about 2014, and he sets up, and the thing that I always try to point out to people, I'm not going to go through the whole thing. People think that Tom DeLonge set this organization up. Absolutely not true. If you believe that, you have missed the whole story. The whole story was that Tom DeLonge was into UFOs. He had a conspiracy website called Strange Times in 2012, and he decides that he wants to try to find out what's going on. Because he's a big rock star, there's a lot of his audience, and he comes in contact with somebody, and I think it was the father, and he says, does your father talk about UFOs? Oh yeah, all the time. So he phones up this guy, and this guy works for Lockheed Skunk Works, and he says, you know, I'm interested in just trying to get stuff out of this guy, and the guy says, this is serious stuff. I mean, don't get in a car. If someone comes to you and says, get in the car, don't get in the car. You're talking serious material here. Don't get into this kind of thing. Tom keeps going, and then the guy phones him back, and this is the key to the whole thing. People will say the New York Times basically says Tom DeLonge set this thing up. This is how it happened. The guy phones him back, and he says, we're having a party in the parking lot of the Lockheed thing, and we'd like you to come down and introduce the president. That's called throwing the fish line out and see if you can ring him in. And of course, what's Tom DeLonge saying? Oh yeah, sure, I'll come introduce the president as long as I can talk to him for 5 minutes. So he goes on to the parking lot. He talks to the head of Lockheed Skunk Works, who I believe was Robert Weiss. He introduces Robert Weiss, and then they invite him to Area 51. Now Area 51, George Knapp, who's been working on the Area 51 story for like 35 years, never been to Area 51. And this guy, Rockstar, is there like in a couple of weeks. They say, oh yeah, come on up, and they bring him up to Area 51. Gets in a secure facility. They got all the white noise. They got the guys with the machine guns, all this sort of stuff. He goes through all these series of stuff, and he makes his pitch. And what he says, and this is true, this is what you got to remember: the government cannot put anything out. You can't stand the president up. You can't stand the CIA director. So they need someone to share the message. They need someone to tell the message. So that's what Tom DeLonge says. He says, "You're messing this thing up. You're not getting the message out. I can get to the people. You can't get the kids." This is Facebook, this is Twitter, this is all this YouTube stuff. You guys can't do this. You need me. And they sold him. And so then he's talking to them, and he gives them his spiel, and the one guy says, you know, this might actually work. And then they say, we got someone you want to meet. So Tom DeLonge is not setting this thing up. He's invited to Area 51. Then they say, we got someone you to meet. And he gets an email that says, meet outside the Pentagon at a certain time in a certain place. And it's in, I think it was Pentagon City is where they met. So he goes to Pentagon City. They have two guys sitting in a room, and the two guys, Tom DeLonge, this rock star guy, sits down, and they say, things like this do not happen in the White House. They do not happen in Congress. They happen when a couple of people like we in this room, sit down and decide among ourselves to move the football down the field. So and these are intelligence guys. So they send him to NASA, and he meets with a high-level person there, and I think with a second person, who I know who the second person is. He goes there, and they talk to him. So now he's got these guys in Washington. He's got these guys, National Aeronautical Space Administration. They send him to Ames on the West Coast. He has a meeting there, and he ends up meeting the General McCaslin. And General McCaslin, I'm pretty sure it was General McCaslin in this meeting, where McCaslin sits there, and they come in, he flies in, he doesn't even leave the area, he's still inside flying in, doesn't even leave the airport. They meet in a restaurant, and the guy sits down, and he says, it was the Cold War. And every day we knew that we could have a nuclear war and be gone. And during that time, that we encountered an alien life force, or a life force, or something like that. So this guy sends him. He meets the general. Then they send him to Colorado Springs, and then he meets a guy by the name of General McKay and a colonel. And then he puts out his first book in April of 2016, and he suddenly gets met by Jim Semivan. Jim from Semivan comes along and like, where did you get this material in the book? Who are you talking to? And they take 6 intelligence agents and they put him in a room in a hotel room in San Diego, and they grill him for 2 days. But then they join the team. He phones up John Podesta, and this will be a little bit later when he meets up with John Podesta. John Podesta gets involved. And so this is an important thing to remember. He did not set this thing up. He was set up. They built the team for him to feed material. They figured that you need to feed this material. So whether it's true material or no bad material, it is being fed to him. He did not set this organization up, and that's important to remember. There's some conservative elements in this thing that are sort of in the UFO community who basically are saying, don't use the word UFO, don't use the word alien, be skeptical, and saying that there's no government program. And this is was sort of pointed at me. There were some interviews that were done that basically said, who are these people? Who's got this idea that there's some sort of conspiracy? There's some sort of conspiracy that the government is feeding something. Well, that's me, and maybe a few other people. But that's definitely me. I've written a number of books about the fact that the government is leaking material. And they say, well, who are these people? Sort of like nutcase people. Where did they get the idea of a cabal controlling police? And the idea was, no, it's just New York Times. New York Times put out an article. It's just good reporting by the New York Times. And so they're looking at me and saying, well, where do you get the idea there's somebody feeding this material? There's some sort of conspiracy. And I guess it would come down to the fact that December 16th, and you probably all know this, by December 16th last year, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and Politico all did a UFO story that took them 2 months of research. And none of those papers had ever done the New York Times had done one straight up UFO piece. But the Washington Post does not do UFO stories. So suddenly 3 newspapers, all on the same morning, go with this major story about the fact that, oh, by the way, the government is investigating UFOs. They spent $22 million over 5 years, and they released these films. So you've probably seen these Nimitz film. They released these films. So where would we get the idea that that was a setup? Well, it's very obvious. If all 3 newspapers who never do UFO articles all suddenly the same day, major thing and saying UFOs are for real, then it means that somebody was behind that release, because they just don't normally know UFO articles, and they wouldn't all come out on the same day. So this is goes back to knowing who the players are. One of the players is Bob Bigelow. He's the guy in Las Vegas who has the aerospace company, billionaire guy. He used to have Comfort Inns and Bigelow Tea and this sort of stuff. Very, very rich guy. And he gets interviewed in 2013. And as I said, I don't really listen to music, but I listen to a lot of interviews, like 5 or 6 times. He does an interview in 2013 with George Knapp. And George Knapp says to him, is there a program? Is there a program to leak this material out? And this is what Bigelow, who deals with all the agencies in Washington, because he's got this out, he's putting pods on the space station and stuff like that. He said, I think there is some an effort of sympathy towards this in other areas and other circles that might be government connected, that might feel the time is right for more honest delivery of the truth as to the existence of the phenomenon. So this is 2013. Bigelow basically said in 2013 the government is doing something, and he would know. So this is another indication that the government is actually working behind this thing. I say there's 3 different disclosures. People inside, a couple of people inside TSSA say, no, it's not right. 1973, 74, there's actually Bob Emenegger, who used to be, I didn't see him at the conference this year. He lives in Fayetteville. He had a thing in 1975. He's brought in by the U.S. government to do a documentary. They would give him what he had access. He could walk in the Pentagon without signing in. He and his partner Alan Sandler put this documentary together called UFOs Past, Present, Future. And in that part of that documentary, they do a thing called the Hollow Air Force Base story, which is where they got the idea for, I believe, the idea for close encounters of the third kind. They have the thing, it's landing. They have all the cameras going. Happens at Hollow Air Force Base, and even Hal Puthoff, who's one of the main people in To the Stars, actually says, because they came to me looking for the film back many years ago, and the fact was that they say this was an actual disclosure effort by Richard Nixon to get out information. It was an actual plan. And in 1983, Bob Emenegger actually got a second offer to do another documentary in 1983, and the first question he asked when they said, we'd like to do this again, you did this documentary in the 1970s, you put this stuff out, the government liked it, we'd like to do another one. And he went, what's behind this? This is Ronald Reagan. They wouldn't answer his question. So they put that out. Then I maintained absolutely from 1988, and you can see these things on YouTube. The first one, the documentary is called. The second one is on the internet. It's called UFOs That Has Begun, 1979. The second is called UFO Cover-Up Live. It was done in the final days of the Reagan administration. Reagan was very much into UFOs. The idea of Area 51 is on a flowchart on that documentary. The parapsychology unit at the DIA, which would not be declassified until 1995, was on the flowchart. They showed this. Flowchart, that's where the idea of the Avery came from, the Condor, the Falcon, the Lime Alien, Area 51, that was all in this documentary before it ever was made public. And this slow thing that comes from the Brookings Institute report from the 1960s. They said if extraterrestrial life is discovered, it could be dangerous to the lower civilization, which is us. may disappear. That's the way it seems to work in history, and that you have to acclimatize people to what's going on in order to stop this from happening. So 1988, I maintain, is another major disclosure effort that they made. They disagree with me, but I absolutely maintain that that is one. And 2017, and they're also maintaining that this is not a disclosure effort, what's going on. They say the ATIP program is not a full disclosure program. And I would agree. The ATIP program was not set up for disclosure, but they did leak the ATIP program as part of a disclosure plan. So the ATIP program is not a disclosure plan. It was a plan to investigate UFOs that were around huge military operations, like exercise, like the Nimitz thing, where they have a carrier and they have a destroyer, and they have planes, and they have this whole armada of ships and stuff like are moving through that have a lot of protection. All these UFOs were showing up for like 2 weeks at a time, and they were being filmed on the East Coast, on the West Coast, and that kind of stuff is what they leaked. So it wasn't so much that it was a program, but it was part of a disclosure program. Now, what they say is that what happened, if you followed the To the Stars story, Lou Elizondo was one of the main characters. He retires the day before he joins Tom DeLonge, who has a news conference on October the 11th of last year. This is when they make the announcement. They don't put out a press release. It's a very quiet news announcement the day before Lou Elizondo quits. And the story that they put out is that Lou Elizondo was frustrated. He put his resignation letter in there. It never got to the Secretary of Defense, but he was frustrated and he wanted to go, and that's the only reason this thing came out, is because Lou Elizondo was retiring and he wanted to get the information that we need to study this more. And yet, when you listen to Tom DeLonge, like I do, you go back and listen to the interviews for the 5th time, and he said, I hired him away. He knew about him long before, and he went in and hired Lou Elizondo away for this program to get him into these group of people. So there are, as was done in the intro, there's what's called the Cosmic Club, and what we're told, there's over 40 people involved in this thing. A lot of them are academics. A lot of them are people who are sort of not very much involved. They're sort of, they know what's going on. They're being asked questions and stuff, and they don't want to be exposed because they're academics. They're in university stuff. Rice University, there's one. North Carolina, Durham, there's one. And so these people don't want to be exposed, but the whole team has been put together. This is not a couple of people. Because this is DeLonge. So this is 2015. Tom DeLonge, he actually posts the picture on Facebook of the Area 51 as he's going in at the gate. And we have, as I said, the Messiah thing. You have a situation where Tom DeLonge believes that he's going to get this thing out, and he builds a team. This happened once already. If you've been around since before Jesus was a carpenter like I have in this field, you know that Bill Moore in the 1980s was what they considered He wrote the first book on Roswell. You would not know Roswell. That's where the idea of the name Roswell didn't happen in Roswell. It only is called the Roswell because Bill Moore wrote a book in 1980 called The Roswell Incident. When he put that out, it had all sorts of major witnesses. It wasn't hypothetical. It was, he had, intelligence officers, people that had been there, and it's called The Roswell Incident. And he was contacted, almost like Tom DeLonge, exactly the same thing. He was phoned up, and all these guys have ego. You need ego. You need ego to run this thing. Like me, I would just go, forget it, I don't need this. I'm not going to go through this nonsense. But these guys have ego. So Bill Moore had the ego, and Tom DeLonge has the ego to pull this thing off. And they phoned up Bill Moore after the book was published, days after the book was published, and said, you're the only guy who knows what you're talking about. He went, that's true. And then about a week later, he's on his book tour, and this book I think sold 1 million copies. It's a huge selling book. And he's on the book tour, and he got a phone call off Air Force Base, and the second guy said to him, you only got knows what you're talking about. And then they drag him in. They gave him what was became known as the Avery, which was 24 sources, 24 inside sources. Now Tom's got 40. Stephen Greer claims he's got 550, and that's the thing. They're using these people to feed material into the public. So I mentioned this before. Tom met this general at Colorado Springs. He goes to the Pentagon. They give him his email. Go to the Pentagon. Christopher Mellon. They put this thing out. Well, the videos have come out, and that they were declassified, and it happened because Lou Elizondo retired. What you have to know is that those videos were already being declassified last August, long before Lou Elizondo decided to retire. So there was, again, it shows that this stuff was being done. Rogan, if you saw the interview with Joe Rogan with Tom DeLonge, he says to him, he says, where are you getting this stuff from? All this stuff. And he said, take a guess. Look around at the people that I'm surrounded by. And this is true. He has very high-level people that he's surrounded by. So Rogan said, people around you are telling this stuff? And he said, well, I don't want to get into that. People that I'm surrounded by, and I'm very close to this stuff. So then he starts to cover his sources. Once he starts pushing, who are these people you're talking to, then Tom DeLonge backs off. Here's Jim Semivan. He talked with a friend of mine, Melinda Leslie, and I knew this interview was taking place, and we've still kept quiet who set up the interview. It was a very, very important person, and there was a second person that was helping support. This is an experiencer who was helping get this interview to happen. It's a very major sort of name that we haven't recognized that yet. But he does an interview where we all have these questions. Which that person asked to do this interview is going to take place. And my main question was, is it constitutional? And I didn't get an answer. I didn't ask the question. Is this legal? Is this constitutional? Are you following the law? Or are you a bunch of guys that are rogue and just doing what you want to do? And I believe it's constitutional. I believe it's being signed off by the President of the United States, by high-level people. Everybody knows down the chain of command what's going on here. And he said the part that he was doing was constitutional, but he didn't really wasn't asked the right question. So meets Podesta. Now Podesta was the campaign manager for Hillary Clinton. That's one of the people he did contact. He contacts John Podesta, and he says to John Podesta, he gives him the spiel, I'm the guy, I'm staying with Podesta, this thing up, and I get the message. Says John, and then John says, well, I'm kind of busy, phone me back in a couple of months. And Tom figures out the boss guy, so a waste of time, and get the picture. And John phones him back 2 months later, and he says, okay, really important. Right now. Now this is the key. This thing's not being set up. John says this thing's significant fly to Washington right now. So John, that's the thing. He starts out. And I think the reason he waited 2 months is he has to go and say, who's talking to Tom DeLonge? What's going on? Is somebody running an operation or something? And he needs to get permission to get involved. And 2 months later, he phones up and he said, okay, I'm ready to play. I'm in Washington, D.C. So Tom DeLonge flies to Washington to meet with John Podesta, and he's in a video that hasn't been released, a documentary yet. And they said I didn't phone him back because I didn't believe that he was. So here's John Podesta, and it all falls apart with the WikiLeaks emails. John Podesta's emails are leaked, and even though it was a bad thing, it was actually good for the UFO community because it actually exposed everybody. All the correspondence between Tom DeLonge and John Podesta was being shown. And this is shows another thing that shows that there are people behind that are pushing this issue. John Podesta does this tweet in February of 2015. The next day, he's leaving the Obama administration. He's a chief advisor to Barack Obama. He leaves. The day he leaves, he puts this tweet. Finally, my biggest failure of 2014, once again, which means he tried it with Bill Clinton and he couldn't sell the issue. Once again, I'm trying again, once again, not securing the hashtag disclosure. Hashtag disclosure was what Stephen Bassett was using. They were sending tweets. They were tweet storm. They had millions of tweets going into congressmen and stuff. So he uses this hashtag disclosure of the UFO files. The truth is out there, and then he copies Marie Dowd. And it was actually Steve that figured this out. It took us a while to figure out why would he copy a reporter in the New York Times. The reason he copied Marie Dowd is in 1997, if you remember the Roswell report, they had come out with this report that said, well, first they came out with a report that said it was Mogul Blue. And then Clinton saw the report, and Clinton was very upset, and he made this speech in Belfast, Northern Ireland, and he said, you know, I've got this letter from Ryan, and I never did find the letter. I got this letter from Ryan, and Ryan, here's the answer to your question. No, as far as I know, a UFO did not crash at Roswell, New Mexico, but if they did crash, they did, and there were bodies, they didn't tell me, and I want to know. And that meant the first Roswell report didn't have bodies. Explain to me where the bodies. So they had to do a second Roswell report, which came out in 1997. That's the one where they said, well, these people were reporting these little 4-foot gray aliens, and the reason they did was because in 1953 we dropped 6-foot-tall wooden dummies with Air Force uniforms with parachutes on them that had a thing, $25 if you bring this thing back in, and people mistook them for 4-foot-tall aliens 5 years later. And so when that story was broke, if you ever saw the video of the guy doing the news conference, the reporters are absolutely falling off the chairs laughing. It's just the craziest thing I ever heard. And Marie Dowd actually writes an article in the New York Times and says, this is the stupidest thing I ever heard. In fact, this actually proves Roswell took place, because this is the stupid thing I heard. And that's why he copies Marie Dowd. So you see what they're doing. It's not direct. It's this indirect thing behind the scenes. You got to see who they're talking to and what's going on. So Marie Dowd, but she never did get involved. She was copied on this, but she never did play the game. Okay, so Leslie Kane, this was exposed in the WikiLeaks email where some guy who wrote a book on Apollo 11 talks about some UFO sighting, that a military thing that had never been exposed. So Leslie writes to John Podesta, and she said, another confirmation of yet more documents from the public. The knowledge belongs to the people under the law. We can get the ball rolling during this transition window, perhaps a quiet meeting with the right people before your next assignment. I have the perfect briefing package. So you can see behind the scenes, Leslie Kane, who was one of the articles on the New York Times, a thing that came out on December 16th, is working with John Podesta. John Podesta wrote the foreword to her book on UFOs, and she's in the background, and they're trying to move disclosure, because John Podesta is big time in UFOs. He's made numerous statements that we've got to get the truth out, and so that's where that came from. Okay, this goes to the most important part of the WikiLeaks thing with UFOs, and I'll just skip the slides, but I'll just tell you what happened. So he's dealing with John Podesta, and he wants to introduce him to Robert Weiss, who's this guy at Lockheed Skunk Works, and the general at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and they set up a go-to meeting on January the 25th, 2016. John Podesta doesn't really know how to use a computer, so they're using a go-to meeting, and this is his secretary. His secretary is saying, okay, the meeting's set for this January 25th. I'll show you how to set up this meeting, John. We'll do it on it's like an open video conference thing called go-to meeting, and I'll set it up for you. And basically, all the people show up. Podesta's there. He's running the meeting. There's Robert Weiss from Lockheed Skunk Works. There's General McCaslin, and then there's General McKay, and there's no doubt the meeting is not about his next musical record. It's about UFO disclosure. And John is hosting this meeting. And this gets exposed when the WikiLeaks thing gets exposed, suddenly they realize that they have this meeting. And they have the meeting, and then there's actually, I'm going to skip all these slides because I want to get to the experiencer part. They actually have the meeting. And the funny thing was, John Podesta, when he was in the Clinton White House, was always known as the X-Files man in the Clinton White House. And he actually was interviewed a number of times about it. People would joke, and he had X-File paraphernalia in his entry room into his office and stuff like that. And he would always say that when X-Files was on, he didn't care what was going on at the White House. He went home and watched X-Files. So he was called the X-Files man. And in one of the newspaper articles in the 1990s, he actually says to the reporter, he said they actually phoned Area 51 to find out what was going on. Is something going on there? And then he said, but the strange thing was, so you have John Podesta in the 1990s. He's phoning Area 51. They have this meeting on January 25th, this go-to meeting where all these guys are talking about UFO disclosure. And then a month later, one of the WikiLeaks emails that was released was Robert Weiss. Tom DeLonge writes to John Podesta. He says, "Oh, Robert Weiss contacted me." Now, this is the Area 51 guy. He's working at Area 51. He runs the Area 51. He phoned me and he said, "Can you ask John if there's any follow-up?" Which indicated that during that January 25th meeting, John had promised to do something. We're talking about disclosure. Okay, I'm going to try to do this. And Weiss is saying, is there any follow-up? And even any little thing, he would accept. What's going on? So in the 1990s, John Podesta is phoning Area 51, and in 2016, Area 51 is phoning John Podesta to find out what's going on. So this was all exposed by WikiLeaks, and what happened was these three generals were outed, and it was like they had to redo the program because these guys were suddenly exposed, even though nobody went and interviewed them. And that's the problem. We know who these people were. We know what their involvement was. And in the one, and I'll skip the email, but in the one, General McCaslin actually writes him a memo. And this comes to this thing about people saying, well, what's this idea that there's these people actually doing this thing behind the scenes? This is crazy. This tinfoil hat people. He actually writes a memo that was released, or an email that was released in the WikiLeaks when it all came out, where Tom DeLonge sends it to John Podesta, and he said, my main guy, who's this two-star general at Wright-Patterson, has ideas on how we should do this. And he's talking about the fact that you've got to get agencies to know what they're doing. They all have to write supportive memos, and then you've got to drag in NASA. If you don't have them in there, it's all going to fall apart. And he's basically telling you how to do disclosure. And this was exposed. So suddenly these generals, and people now still feel these generals are gone. And I know from the inside, they aren't gone. They just made it look like they disappeared. But what they do is they bring out the B team. So you have the head of Lockheed Skunk Works, and then you have this head guy at Wright-Patterson, head guy at Space Command. These guys are involved. Then when they do the news conference, so it all sort of breaks down. 9 months later, they have the news conference, and they have what I call the B team. So they got not the head guy from Lockheed Skunk Works. They got sort of the second in charge, this Steve Justice. And he suddenly, I retired, and he joins the Tom DeLonge team. So you have that guy, and then instead of the two-star general, you have Elizondo comes out. He's like a junior defense guy, and then you have Mellon, who's a defense guy, who comes out instead of McKay. So you have like I call them the B team, and they bring them out, and the generals, they say, oh, the generals had to, they had to pull out and stuff. But from what I'm told, the generals didn't pull out. Now let me skip. This is all the emails, and I've done some updates. My YouTube channel is White House UFO, and we have put a lot of updates. When this story was breaking, I was doing updates every couple days, and they're half hour long. So there's about 7 hours of updates where I go through all these different things. Tom DeLonge puts out the book. So you have this meeting January of 2016. In April of 2016, he puts out Secret Machines Chasing Shadows. This is the one where the CIA descends upon him. And they put him in a room in San Diego, and 6 intelligence agents for 2 days start to say to him, how do you know this? Who are you talking to? According to Tom DeLonge, when they heard who he was talking to, they went, whoa, okay. And they joined the team. And that's where the semi-man gets involved, and they start helping him as well. Here he says 8 elite advisors, each of who has held the highest positions within the military. This is General McCaslin. This is the guy from Wright-Patterson. Let's just skip through this. There's Robert Weiss, and who just retired. I think he just retired a couple days ago. He's now free to get involved in UFOs. And the other thing that I don't think people realize is that the president was involved. I always maintain the president knows what's going on, and this thing has to be green-lighted. You're not going to run an operation like this if the president doesn't know, because the president is responsible. If the CIA does something really stupid, they're not going to go to the CIA, they're going to go to the president. He's responsible. So people don't realize, because I did the presidents, that no president until Bill Clinton talked about UFOs. And people will say, oh, Ford did. He talked about it before he was president. He said, he was in Michigan, and he said, we should take the officials who are involved in this thing, we should put them under oath, and we should force them to tell us what's going on. The day he took the oath of office to become president, he never used the word UFO ever again until after he left the White when he was in the White House, he never used the word UFO. Same as Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter said, I will release the UFO files except for the classified material that deals with weapons. When he got in the White House, he never used the word UFO. It wasn't until Bill Clinton came along, that's why I wrote the Clinton book. The Clintons were in, they were in all their speeches, they were just like hammering this thing with UFO references. So it didn't start till the Clintons, and Obama was really bad at it. He was talking about aliens all the time, and the thing was that it wasn't in response to a question. He was actually bringing it up, and it's a plausible deniability. The president, I maintain my personal view, the president is running the cover-up. And they don't want you to know the president is running the cover-up because everybody knows, even I have the president's phone number. I know what the switchboard number is. You would start, 2,000 reporters would start phoning the White House and want a news conference, and it will all unravel very fast. So what they want you to think is there's an evil cabal, and you're going to spend the next 70 years running down a dark alley looking for the evil cabal, and you're never going to find it because it's not. It's the president of the United States that's running it. So what I say is the president has to greenlight this thing. And if you look at what Obama was doing, Obama did greenlight this thing. He was hinting at it. He was going on the Kimmel show. Bill Clinton showed up on the Kimmel show. They were sort of indirectly using the word, dropping the thing. The main one that he has is an interview he does with GQ magazine in November of 2015. This is just when Tom DeLonge starts. And this is sort of like where he gets the green light. And again, he doesn't have to bring this up. This is the question. Have you ever said, give me the JFK assassination files. I want to read them. Give me all the secret stuff. That's the question. It's got nothing to do with UFOs. And Barack says, I got to tell you, it's a little disappointing. People always ask me about Roswell and the aliens and UFOs. And it turns out the stuff that's going on that's top secret isn't nearly as exciting as you'd expect. In this day and age, it's not as top secret as you'd think. So basically tells this guy, the UFO stuff that's top secret isn't as exciting as you think it is. And I always make this joke. The guy either had a stroke or fell asleep or something because he just handed it to him. And what does the guy ask him? Next question, would you like to be a Supreme Court Justice? I mean, he gave it to him and the guy didn't. And that's the problem is we don't follow up on it. Where like nobody chased the general when they were outed. Nobody went after this thing. When the question was asked in the White House, nobody followed. I'll do that later. But nobody follows up on some of these claims. How much time have I got? 2015. This is important to realize. There was Stephen Greer tells a story that he tried to get this briefing material, and I've been to the front library, I saw it, and it actually says on the front cover, President did not read. Somebody wrote on it, President did not read. Stephen Greer said he read it, he kept it in the bathroom or whatever was going on there. And it was a huge pile of people. It was like 600 pages of material, documents, and all sorts of stuff. So Bill sent, apparently, Stephen Greer tells a story that a friend of Bill, an FOB, a friend of Bill, comes back and says, the president can't do this. The president's afraid that if he does this, he'd end up like JFK, and Stephen Greer laughs, and the guy says, no, I'm serious. He said, he can't do it, but you can. And that's what you got to remember. I believe this firmly. That's what they want. They want us to do it. They want some way to take us off the hook. So when you see the Tom DeLonge operation, you see what's going on. What you've seen is they have moved the whole operation to Bob Bigelow. And Bob Bigelow is private industry. Bob Bigelow now controls basically all the UFOs from 2007 on. All the material, reports, hardware, basically controls the whole thing. All sorts of material. And he controls it. But he's private, so Bob Bigelow's later on, Ben Hansen does a review. He does he's an expert in FBI guy, so he does analysis of people's motions and facial expressions and stuff. And he had done Bill Clinton, and he did Barack Obama. And then this one, so when this happened, I sent it to him. I said, oh, do this one. What happened? And he's the guy that picked up that they were reading off cue cards. This whole thing was planned. And Barack is looking straight ahead reading off a cue card, and she's reading off a small cue card down here. And they actually show the cue cards that they used for her. It had little drawings, because she can't read yet. So they had these little drawings for her cue card. So they say, well, you're the expert. What would you like to know from the president? She said, I want to know if aliens exist. And then Barack, this is what Barack says. He says, the truth, Macy, is we, and then he sort of stumbles and hesitates, we, and he sort of stumbles and hesitates again, haven't actually made direct contact with aliens yet, but when we do, I will let you know. You got to remember, the key part was when Ben Hansen did the review, and when I looked, I went, you're right, they're reading off cue cards. This is all planned. So Barack goes out. February 2016, CIA puts out on their webpage, they've always said, we're not involved in UFOs, and suddenly they've got a thing, how to investigate a UFO sighting, on their webpage. And it's like a straight up piece, how to investigate a UFO. And they're not involved. 2017, just 2 days before Barack Obama, like I mentioned in 1988, UFO cover-up live happened a couple days before Reagan had left the administration, and Barack actually drops like 12 million pages of secret material, and it's remote viewing material, it's UFO material, drops it onto the internet 2 days before he leaves. And here's the one, the latest one, where Barack he's doing a fundraiser thing for something or other on the Kimmel show, and he does this thing where he said, if you contribute to this thing, if you get involved, he said, I'll share my files on the aliens. I know how badly he, which is Kimmel, wants to see them. And then the guy off set says, you can't do that. You can't do that. They're classified. And then Barack adds, he says, but I have them. They're right here in my desk. And the guy said, no, you can't release them. And he goes, oh, okay. And this is the thing. They put this stuff, they're dropping this stuff indirectly to acclimatize. And you got to remember, this is going on the same time as this Tom DeLonge operation where they're putting material out. And this is the deal that when a president talks about something, this happened with Jimmy Carter with the stealth fighter, this happened with Barack Obama. Barack Obama was the guy that released the Area 51 thing. He was giving an award to Shirley MacLaine, and during that thing he said, he makes a speech, he says, oh, and I was, when you become president, you know, everybody asks you what happened at Area 51, and I didn't know, so I phoned up Shirley MacLaine to find out what was going on. And then everybody laughs, and then he goes, you know, I'm probably the first president ever to use the word Area 51. At that moment, it's declassified. When the president talks about something, it's declassified. So that's what happened to Stealth Fighter, and so you have Barack starting to talk about UFOs, and that's why I say he's greenlighting this stuff. You don't realize what's going on in behind the scenes. They have to rework the thing, and this is what I'm going to get to at the end here. So the ATIP program is one of the part of the Tom DeLonge thing. They released this ATIP thing. They have